When you're beginning with trap bar deadlifts, there's a couple of options you have available to you. If you've read any of the articles we have on pain-free training, you're going to find out that there's a lot of differences between what you can do from a traditional trap bar deadlift, increasing yourself to something as difficult as maybe a staggered stance, or finding yourself with a single leg deadlift if you decide to go to that direction. So we're going to then answer the question, well, how do I know what to use and when to use it? Because that's a great question, and a great way to look at your training is whenever you're deciding you want to get involved in an exercise, there should be a reason behind it. There should be the understanding of how it's going to translate into your next goal or what you're trying to get out of the activity. So we're going to start to discuss that when it comes to the trap bar specifically, because it's one of the pieces that you can find in a gym that aren't necessarily as utilized, but as you've seen through the pain-free training model of what we've done with the PPSC, we're going to really lean into the trap bar for a decent amount of reasons. So number one, with the leaning into the trap bar, the main thing that we enjoy about it is the neutral grip, its adjustability when it comes to a height perspective, and generally how easily you can translate it into your everyday activities. So let's hit them one at a time. When it comes to a shoulder perspective, putting ourselves into the neutral position is going to take a little bit of stress out of being in a traditional pronated position or palms down that we would see within the traditional conventional deadlift or a barbell deadlift from the floor. So when you decide to do a trap bar deadlift, we are putting somebody into a neutral grip, and that's going to place those arms into a much more relaxed and stable position than we would have them when they're internally rotated or twisting into that pronated position that people traditionally see when they go to the conventional deadlift. Now, if we're talking about the transferability of what we have, whenever you pick up things in your everyday life, you're going to find that you're generally picking them up from your sides. Very rarely do I see somebody in an airport picking up their bags from the front part of their shins. Very rarely do I see somebody trying to lug things either from the front or back side of their body. Generally, they pick it up from the side because it's a much more stable position for us. So we want to be able to train that when it comes to our perspective of our coaching and the sessions that we have for people. And the third part is the adjustability of height. So for example, you may have bars such as this where you're able to manipulate the handles up and down, or you may have DC blocks, or you may have wood blocks, or plyo boxes, or whatever it may be to adjust the height up and down when it comes to getting someone to the right place to pull from for them. Because we're going to have ideal scenarios where we can pull from the ground as best as possible, but we want to work within the range of motion that best utilizes your subset of muscles to get you into a better spot, get you stronger, but not leave you with the aches and pains that you would have the next day. So now that we've discussed that, let's talk about the trap bar and when to decide when to work with somebody in these three specific models. Number one is going to be the trap bar deadlift. The trap bar deadlift for me is the foundation, it's the beginner's model, it's the baseline, and it's really available for anybody. So what happens is when people think about, oh, can I progress to something? Of course you can progress to something, but does it mean that you're in the best position possible for your training moving forward? Well, not necessarily. So when we're talking about the trap bar itself, how do I get myself to get stronger and utilize as much muscle as possible that is safe and effective for me? So when we talk about the trap bar deadlift, this is going to be the beginner model. It's the level one for a lot of our people when it comes to the deadlifting, when it comes to the hex bar or trap bar, whatever you want to call it. But past that point, you can always reutilize it. No matter how progressed I'll get through a program, I'm always going to lean back into the trap bar deadlift, hex bar deadlift, okay? And this is going to have ourselves into a nice, stable position from here. One of the key things that we'll see from people when it comes to getting ourselves into a best position possible is generally people like to try and stay wide with their trap bar deadlift, which isn't really advantageous. So I ideally try and tell people to stack the feet directly under the hips. That's going to allow you to go from this bottom position and transfer directly into the ground. This is a best practice for somebody who's beginner, advanced, intermediate, no matter where they are on the spectrum. The trap bar deadlift is a great way to move yourself forward in your training. If you are budgeted for time and you want to get something that's a little bit of back, a little bit of lower body, a little bit of functionality, getting yourself really sweating, moving, conditioning perspective, hypertrophy, whatever, the traditional trap bar deadlift is a great option for you. Now, if we were to progress ourselves to the next step, which we see within our options, it would be a staggered stance trap bar deadlift. And a staggered stance is a great hybrid from finding someone between their peak strength of trap bar deadlifting and their lunging options that we see within squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry. So if we were to go to the lunging options, a lot of times there are a decent amount of people that aren't super comfortable when it comes to going to single leg stuff. Whether it's previous knee injuries, whether they're uncomfortable or wobbly with their balance, it could be a mental cognitive thing that they're trying to get over. But in a lot of these perspectives, there has to be a bridge between that gap. And sometimes the staggered deadlift is a great bridge to work between that true unilateral and true bilateral. So with our staggered stance, what we're looking to do is not get ourselves into a really crazy perspective. We don't want to go as staggered as possible. We're not looking to split squat. But what I'm looking to do is I'm trying to place the front foot here, and then ideally my backside leg, whichever one you decide you want to go with, your backside toe is going to be in line with the heel. So if I were to stack myself up here, I'm only going as far as this. We're not going for wide stances within our staggered stance. I'm just going just behind that front side heel. What this will allow me to do is come up from this spot and use the main range of motion from this front side leg while taking a percentage of that stress off that backside leg. So all we're doing is we're taking the manipulations of percentage from ideally 50-50 to maybe 60-40 or 70-30. And we're easing our way into transferring ourselves to a true single leg pattern, which is great. So for us, that's going to be one of the best ways we can do this. The third option, which a lot of people don't necessarily utilize, is going to be the single leg trap bar deadlift. Now this may be similar to a skater squat that you see. If you have the silver Troy or cap barbell trap bar, you're going to see that it's a full hexagonal bar. So I'm working with an open bar right now, but a full hexagonal bar, one of the ideal things you can do within this position is take your feet from your normal stance. You're going to shift one dead down the center of your body, and then you'll be able to place this back leg on the back side of the trap bar. So if we were to spin this one around for us, what you'd end up doing is you'd have yourself here, leg down the center, back leg resting in this spot, and then we would go up from here. Okay? So this position allows us to stand up nice and firm and come back down, working in more of a skater squat type of perspective. This is a true transition to single leg. So I would position this more similarly to our true single leg pattern where we have our modified pistols, skater squats, shrimp squats. We see our single leg deadlifts. This is within that perspective. The one differentiator is that backside leg can be as much assistance or non-assistive as you want it to be. So deciding how much you want to put pressure on that backside will make a huge difference within your training, and that's probably for someone who has to focus more on transference, maybe a little more advanced, find themselves down the road. That's the difference with that exercise. Break this down. You have your three options when it comes to trap bar deadlifting, and we're looking at the hybrid version, the squatty hingey type of trap bar deadlift we're used to seeing. Number one is the trap bar deadlift ourselves, the hex bar deadlift. We're going to see this with most of our people. This is the green light, the opening block. This is the starting line. For a lot of people when it comes to deadlifting or lifting dead weight or dead inertia from the floor and getting them into multi-joint, full body strength training. The next step, if you're trying to bridge the gap with somebody who maybe has asymmetries from side to side or maybe has some deficiencies when it comes to single leg stuff, we're going to use that staggered stance trap bar deadlift, and that staggered stance is going to allow us to work within the range of our body, getting ourselves back up and then back down. And then we would go to the peak of the pyramid with that true single leg trap bar deadlift. Now if you're talking about adding these into the perspective of your training, spice them up. You don't have to just do one. You might have the availabilities of one and the other. So I commonly like to pair the traditional trap bar deadlift along with a staggered stance, or a single leg along with the staggered stance or trap bar. I generally try and pair trap bar with one of the other options instead of choosing all progressions and no baseline foundational patterns. So when it comes to your training and programming, find your variables, find the things that make the most sense, and choose the right option for the person in front of you. This doesn't mean it's one size fits all, one size fits one, but choose what makes most sense for the person you're working with, and ideally, you're going to create more strength gains, more transference into their everyday life, and less pain moving forward in their programming.